Hey guys, Brian Schultz here with Cape Falcon Kayak, and I'm here in the shop today with the latest version of my full-size solo skin-on frame canoe. Now, if you're familiar with my work here, you know that a couple years ago I created a brand new type of skin-on frame canoe building system that starts with a set of mortised and laminated gunnels, a lot more like you'd see in a skin-on frame kayak, and then uses a formula-based system to determine the length for the ribs. Now, the big advantage to this type of a system is that you don't have to build a strong back and a set of canoe molds before you can start building your canoe, which saves you a lot of time and a lot of money. But the other advantage is that it allows you to size the canoe to the individual user and also to the way that you're going to be using it. And then finally, it lets you nest these canoes together like Russian dolls, which is really cool for being able to transport two larger canoes or even more than that on top of a small car, or being able to store them in small spaces. And so I've been doing this for a couple years now. Originally the system was just designed to build pack canoes, which is a smaller canoe that's meant to be paddled with a double bladed paddle. We came up with the system for building them, the system for nesting them together, and then also a small sail that pops up in the bow and a way to catamaran these together that's great for just having a good time with a friend out on the water, and also a great way for running moving water rivers. But as I was developing the pack canoe system, I kept getting inquiries from people about whether this system could be used to build full-size canoes. Now, initially I was skeptical of this because I didn't think that a free bent system like this could be scaled up into a larger size and still give you really good hull symmetry. But I figured because I was getting so much interest, I would give it a try, and I built myself 6 or 7 different full-size canoes, worked out some kinks in the system, and at this point it's looking like this system will make a full-size canoe with a couple of restrictions. The first one is that it doesn't work very well if you want to add a lot of tumble home into the sides, and also it doesn't work very well for really deep canoes. But for shallow canoes or canoes of moderate depth without a lot of tumble home, the system seems to work out pretty well, although you do need to find really good bending wood to be able to bend the ribs. And so that brings me to my latest full-size solo canoe here, which I'm going to talk about in a minute. But first I want to go back a year and talk about my last full-size solo canoe. Now, the last canoe that I made was 14 feet long, and the reason I chose 14 feet for that is because it is so much easier to find and also build out of 14-foot lumber than to have to purchase 16-foot lumber to build your canoe. And I went with 30 inches wide because it seems like 30 inches is about as wide as you want to go on a solo canoe before it gets difficult to handle with a single bladed paddle. Now, my experience with this last canoe at 14 feet long by 30 inches wide by 12 inches deep was that it didn't quite have the stability that I wanted at the seat height that I wanted, and it also didn't have quite the tracking that I wanted. And so what I ultimately came to was the conclusion that probably every solo canoe designer ever has come to, and that is that if you add about an extra foot and you get somewhere around 14.5 to 15 feet, suddenly the stability gets to be just about what you want for the seat height that you're looking for, and the tracking ends up being a little bit more appropriate as well. So let's go into a little bit more detail about the things that are the same in this canoe as the last one, the things that are different, and how that impacts the performance of the boat. So like I already said, this canoe is 30 inches wide by 12 inches deep, which is just a good moderate size for a solo canoe. And whenever I'm trying to understand new types of boats, I always start in kind of the middle size range so I can understand what things are actually affecting performance before I start heading into more extreme dimensions. Now, another thing that is the same about this is that it has a 6-inch shear curve to it, which is the curve at the top of the gunnels, which is kind of halfway in between an old school, really dramatic shear curve and more of a modern flat canoe shear curve. It has about a 2 to 2.5 inch rocker along the keel, which is, again, a pretty moderate rocker for a canoe. And when it's sitting on the water, it ends up being about 3 inches in the bow and about 1.5 to 2 inches in the stern. It's a tiny bit more rocker than I wanted in this, but I'd rather have more rocker than less rocker because it's always easy to tighten up a loose tracking canoe by adding extra rub strips to the bottom, loading the boat differently, or also just learning to paddle a little bit better. But if you build a canoe with too tight of tracking, it's impossible to loosen it up and it can be really frustrating. Now, additionally, the frame for this is built the same as the frame for the last boat, which means that all the longitudinal members are made out of red cedar and all of the ribs are made out of white oak. And the combination of those in the scantling sizes that I have here gives me a really balanced strength to the boat, but also gives me a really balanced tension to the boat as well, which when it's combined with the skin means that I can take the seat out of the middle and the boat doesn't change shape, which is awesome because, like I said before, it lets me nest multiple boats together, which is just great for being able to transport these canoes and also for being able to store them. Now, the skin on this boat, just like the last one, is a 9-ounce nylon skin. And this is by far my favorite skin for any type of a skin boat because it's strong, but it's also relatively lightweight. It shrinks really well, and it conforms to complex surfaces. And we cover that with anywhere between 3 to 5 layers of 2-part polyurethane to build up a coating that's going to be waterproof and also is going to add abrasion resistance and durability. Now for this particular boat, I put 4 coats of coating on, but on the next one, I might go 3, might go 5, just depends. Now what's different about this particular boat is that this boat is a foot longer, like I said in the beginning, and it also has a little bit more fullness in the midsection in here. And the combination of that extra length and the combination of making a little bit more full of a shape in this area really just got me into a perfect sweet spot between stability and tracking, but also having a canoe that's going to be relatively swift. Because the way that I like to design boats, whether it's canoes or whether it's kayaks, is I like to sit them down on a shallow arched hull, so it's going to have a fairly narrow water line that's going to be quick on the water. But then I like to add a decent amount of reserve buoyancy up a little bit higher here. So when you do lean it over, it ends up hardening up a little bit so you don't tip over. And also there are maneuverability options to really being able to lean on your edge there. So sitting level, this boat doesn't feel tippy, but it doesn't feel super stable. But when I lean it over, it gets a little more stable, which is kind of the perfect shaping balance that I'm looking for. Now, my big success with this particular boat was a modification that I made to my rib shaping system that allowed me to add a little bit more fullness to the middle for that shape, but also allowed me to smooth out my rocker. Because as I was increasing the size of these canoes from my pack canoe designs into my full size canoe designs, I was running into an issue where the increased length of the ribs in the middle was causing them to shrink just a little bit, which was changing the shape in the middle and was stealing a little bit of my rocker. So figured out how to compensate for that. I figured out how to add it to the formula, and now I'm getting exactly the rocker in the shape that I'm looking for in this area. Now, the weight of this boat is 32 pounds. The last boat was 30 pounds, which I love. 32 pounds is not bad though, and I always try to go for the lightest weight boat that I can that is still going to be durable enough for me, because there's a lot of skin-on-frame canoes out there that are extremely lightweight, but most of those are pretty fragile, and I tend to use things pretty hard, and so I feel like something of roughly this weight and this durability kind of strikes a good balance for me as well. Now, also, I'm using the same seat that I used last time, and I absolutely love this seat. This is the curved laminated walnut seat from Northwater Canoes. And you can build your own canoe seat, but honestly, by the time you're done building a canoe seat, you've spent enough money and enough time that just buying a well-made canoe seat like this one really ends up being the smarter option. Now, the cool thing about this seat is that it drops down a little bit, which means that you're sitting a little bit lower, but I can still mount it perfectly to the bottom of the gunnels, which is great because it acts as a thwart in this area and really stabilizes the canoe. Because even though you don't have to have a thwart in one of these canoes, you could actually take this out and paddle it completely open, and you could lay down in the bottom of it if you wanted to. It does end up stiffening up a little bit more if you're stabilizing it. In this case, the seat works really well for that. Now, the height of this seat, like I talked about in the beginning, is just perfect for me because while I usually like to kneel when I'm paddling a canoe, you want to make sure that the thwart is at the right height. And it's really cool if you can make your seat do double duty as a good sitting paddling seat, but also as a good kneeling thwart. And something that I've really had to figure out how to work around with skin-on-frame canoes is the fact that the frame takes up about 3/4 inch of vertical space inside the bottom of the canoe, which reduces the overall space for your feet to slide under the seat here. And so we have to be really careful not to drop the seat too low if we want to be putting our legs under it for kneeling so we don't get trapped underneath there during a capsize. And so this latest seat height combined with this boat width, combined with the length, combined with the hull shape, just all comes together for a really comfortable, just well-handling boat for me on the water. Now, another thing that I did differently on this boat than I did on the last boat was on the last boat I put shear blocks on the end up here just to increase the shear towards the ends of the canoe, and I also put a pretty dramatic recurved stem on it. And both of those things make the canoe look really cool. It kind of looks like a very old school turn of the century canoe, but quite honestly, they functionally don't do anything for the performance of the canoe. So in this canoe, I decided to go a little bit more modern here, and I didn't add the shear blocks on the end of the bow, and I went with just a straight angled stem, which doesn't look as exciting, but if you're a minimalist like me and you really gravitate towards simplicity, it does represent the least amount of weight and the least amount of complexity. Now, another thing I'm doing here that's a little bit different than I did in my last boat is I'm changing how I protect the ends here. On the last boat, I was just using the stitching soaked with the 2-part polyurethane to provide a really tough surface here to take any impact or abrasion, and then pairing that with a small rub strip along the bottom, just like I do with my skin-on-frame kayaks. And I still think that's what I'm going to do in my skin-on-frame pack canoes, but for these full-size canoes, I'm switching over to stitching down the side of the stem right here and leaving a flat spot around the end. And I'm either going to be screwing 1/2-inch wide, high-density polyethylene around the ends here, or I'm going to go with a more traditional approach, which is going to be 3/8-inch half oval brass. And I just ordered a little bit of each. I'm going to do one on one canoe and one on the other and see how they wear over time so I can make a recommendation for that. Now, something I forgot to mention that is the same in this canoe, that is the same in the last canoe, is that the boat is built asymmetrically, which means that it's a little bit taller in the bow than it is in the stern, and it's a little bit wider in the stern than it is in the bow. And there's a lot of advantages to that particular hull shape. I'm not going to go into a lot of detail on that here because I really talked about that at length in the last video. So if you're interested in learning more about why I think an asymmetrical hull shape like this is advantageous, just go back, watch that video. I'll make sure I put a link to it right here. So that's the latest version of my full-size skin-on-frame canoe here. I'm really excited to be getting this into a place where I feel very confident that I can tell people that you can make a really good solo skin-on-frame canoe using our system. Now, as far as the tandem goes, I'm still not quite sure how I feel about that. I've built one full-size tandem, and I think we've had 6 or 7 full-size tandems built, and we haven't had any complaints. Nobody has built one and said, I don't like this boat. But at least for me here at Cape Falcon Kayak, I like to have glowing reports for a boat, whether it's my own feeling when I get into a boat or whether it's feedback from my students and my customers that say that a boat turned out amazing and they really like it before I'm really willing to get behind it and say you can build a fantastic full-size tandem with this system. So you can build a tandem this way, but I'm still considering that experimental until we can get more of these on the water. So I think the solo canoes are a good option using this system right now. Once again, if you want to do that though, you are going to have to find really good bending oak for these ribs here. Because if you try to build a canoe like this with this type of a free bent system with bad bending wood, you're just going to end up getting really frustrated. Fortunately, in most parts of the world, you can either find a source for bending wood or you can order the bending wood online. So it can be a little bit expensive, but it's not a huge barrier. And I feel like the extra expense of getting good bending oak is more than offset by the fact that you're not spending the money or spending the time to build a canoe mold to build around in the first place. Now, where I see this particular boat going from here, this build itself is going to be really fun for me because this canoe is the center canoe of a triple nesting set that I'm going to build. So next canoe I'm going to build here, I'm going to build a 13'8" hybrid double paddle canoe, single blade canoe that's going to fit down inside of here. It's going to be 28 inches wide by 11.5 inches deep by 13'8" long. And it's going to be very similar to what one of my most favorite canoes to date is, which was the canoe that I built way back in video number 14 of my Designing a Skin-on-Frame Canoe series. It was kind of a hybrid pack canoe that ended up being a little bit longer. It had sea kayak speed, it had a lot more stability, it had room for camping gear. And so the big change I'm going to make this time, hopefully it works, is I'm just going to give it a little bit more freeboard so I can use it a little bit better with a single bladed paddle, and hopefully I'll be able to come up with a seating solution that's still comfortable to use with a double bladed paddle. Now, once I've got that boat complete in a few weeks here, next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to start on a boat to fit around the outside of this, which is going to be 15.5 feet long, 32 inches wide, 13 inches deep, and that's going to be a hybrid single blade solo canoe, something that you could use with a larger person. It's also going to be able to be paddled by 2 people that are kneeling in either end of the boat for a kind of a really fast, lightweight sort of day boat. And then finally, I'm going to drop a rowing frame into that. And so a person could take out the seat, they could bolt on the rowing frame, and they could use this same 15.5-foot long canoe to go for what I think is going to be a pretty nice rowing experience. So I'm really excited to see how this triple nesting canoe set shakes out here. I just wanted to start with this first boat here, kind of get back into talking about what we're doing with skin-on-frame canoes here at Cape Falcon Kayak. So when I get these other 2 boats finished, I don't have to make a 40-minute long video while I'm explaining this. So I just want to finish up here by saying that if you're interested in checking out more of what we do here at Cape Falcon Kayak, think about going over to our Instagram feed, because unlike these YouTube videos, which take a lot of time and a lot of effort to produce, and so there's a significant lag time from when I finish a boat to when I could talk about it here, and oftentimes there's boats that I build that don't ever make it onto the YouTube channel because we just don't have enough time to make videos about them. For the Instagram feed, all I have to do during the day is just take photos and videos of the process while I'm building, and then I take the very best ones and I compile it with some text and post it to the Instagram feed and also to my Facebook page at the end of every day. And it just gives you a really detailed view of the skin-on-frame building process. There's a lot of beautiful imagery in there, and also you're going to learn a ton of things about skin-on-frame that you're not going to see anywhere else except for inside of my paid building courses. So if you're interested in that, you can check us out at Cape Falcon Builds on Instagram or on our Facebook page, which is just Cape Falcon Kayak. And then as usual, you can always find me on my website, which is capefalconkayaks.com, where I've got a bunch more skin-on-frame building videos, my skin-on-frame building video courses, and various skin-on-frame resources. So that's it for now. Thanks for watching. If you like this video, make sure you hit that like and subscribe button. Have fun building your skin boat. Be safe on the water. I'll see you next time.